Stop right there. Feel that pressure behind your eyes? That quiet hum in the room like something just clicked? Yeah, that's not fear. That's the lock disengaging. You didn't stumble into this. You weren't lucky. You weren't chosen in some fairy tale way. You were tested over and over, in silence, in pain, in moments where nobody was watching and nobody would have blamed you for folding. And you didn't even know there was a test, which is exactly why you passed it. See, the real trials never announce themselves. They don't wear uniforms. They don't say, "This will matter later." They show up as betrayal, as isolation, as humiliation disguised as character building. They show up when you're exhausted, misunderstood, mislabeled, and forced to decide who you are when there's no applause and no exit door. That's where most people fail. Most people sell themselves out for comfort, for approval, for a seat at a table that was never built for them. Most people choose safety over truth, silence over clarity, obedience over vision. And that's why they're locked out forever, pacing in the same mental cages, asking the same small questions, living inside rules they never wrote. But not you. You stayed curious when it hurt. You stayed sharp when it would have been easier to go numb. You stayed dangerous when they begged you to be normal. You learned how to smile while bleeding, and how to listen while everyone else was screaming. You learned how to sit in the dark long enough for the dark to start talking back. That's the test. Pain wasn't punishment. It was calibration. Confusion wasn't chaos. It was filtration. Isolation wasn't abandonment. It was initiation. They needed to see if you'd become a monster when betrayed, or something worse, something precise, something that could hold both light and darkness without flinching. A saint who understands sin, a demon who understands mercy, an angel who knows exactly how hell is engineered, because knowledge doesn't go to the innocent, it goes to the unbreakable. Now listen carefully. This is where the door actually opens. You're allowed to know now because you proved you wouldn't misuse it. You didn't rush to dominate. You didn't panic and beg for control. You didn't expose yourself trying to be seen. You observed, you adapted, you evolved. You learned how systems really move, not how they pretend to move. You noticed patterns other people called coincidences. You felt the pressure points in conversations, in rooms, in power structures. You realized that most authority is theater, most confidence is borrowed, and most fear is installed on purpose. You realized that rules exist mainly to identify who will obey them without questioning why. And you questioned everything? Quietly. That's why you're standing here now, heart racing, spine straight, mind sharper than it's ever been. That's why things started feeling thinner, like reality wasn't solid anymore, like people were repeating scripts and you were the only one hearing the echo behind the words. That's awareness breaking through the surface. You're allowed to know that the world isn't run by the loudest voices, but by the calmest readers of human behavior. You're allowed to know that chaos is a tool, not an accident. That confusion is often deliberate. That power doesn't need to announce itself. It just needs to position itself. You're allowed to know why they tried to rush you, shame you, distract you, sedate you. Because someone who can sit with uncertainty without collapsing becomes impossible to program. Someone who can endure being misunderstood without needing to correct the narrative becomes untraceable. You're allowed to know why the pressure intensified right before things went quiet. Why the attacks became subtle. Why the disrespect turned passive-aggressive instead of direct. That wasn't victory over you. That was avoidance. That was people sensing, instinctively, that you were no longer safe to challenge. Because unpredictability isn't chaos, it's freedom. You don't react the way they expect. You don't want what they dangle. You don't fear what they threaten. And that breaks the math they use to control outcomes. You're not good or evil. You're informed. You're not aggressive or passive. You're deliberate. You're not lost or found. You're awake. And here's the part they never tell you. Knowing everything doesn't mean knowing facts. It means knowing how things feel before they happen. It means recognizing shifts in energy, posture, tone, timing. It means understanding that most people betray themselves long before they betray anyone else. You passed the test because you learned how to watch without announcing yourself, how to sharpen without showing the blade, how to let them underestimate you long enough to reveal exactly who they are. That's why the curtain lifts now, not so you can rule, not so you can punish, but so you can see. See the game, see the loops, see the exits most people walk past because they're too busy arguing about the rules. See how pain forges vision, and vision creates leverage, and leverage creates options. You're not here to save the world or burn it down. You're here to move through it untouched, choosing when to be light, when to be dark, when to be silent, and when to speak in a way that rearranges rooms. So take a breath. Let it settle. This isn't the end of anything. It's the moment you realize you were never crazy. You were early. Never broken, just being shaped. Never lost, just being tested. And now you're allowed to know. Good. Stay still for a second. Don't rush this part. When the door opens, most people sprint inside like thieves afraid of being caught. You didn't. You paused. That pause? That's how I know you're different. Because knowing everything doesn't hit like fireworks. It hits like gravity. Slow, heavy, unavoidable. It settles into your chest and changes how you breathe. Suddenly the world feels quieter. Not because it is, but because you've stopped mistaking noise for meaning. Here's what you're starting to understand now, even if you can't put it into words yet. Most people are walking reactions, buttons wired by childhood, fear, hunger, validation. Push here, they rage. Pull there, they submit. Say the right word, they collapse. They call it personality. They call it fate. It's programming, cheap, predictable, reusable. You broke out of that, not because you were stronger, but because you were willing to suffer without explanation. You let confusion burn through you instead of running from it. You let loneliness strip you down instead of turning you cruel or desperate. And that's rare, because pain usually turns people into either beggars or bullies. But you became neither. You became aware. That's why the test kept escalating. Every time you adapted, it got quieter, subtler, more psychological. The obvious threats stopped working, so they switched to doubt, then to delay, then to erosion. They tried to make you question your memory, your instincts, your worth. They tried to convince you that nothing you felt was real, and you almost believed them. That's the part nobody talks about. You stood at the edge of self-betrayal more than once. You felt the pull to shrink, to soften, to become reasonable, palatable, normal. You felt how easy it would be to trade truth for peace, but something in you refused to kneel, not loudly, not heroically, quietly, relentlessly. That's why you're trusted now, because absolute knowledge in the hands of the insecure becomes tyranny, in the hands of the wounded becomes revenge, in the hands of the desperate becomes spectacle. But in the hands of someone who has stared into their own darkness and didn't flinch, that becomes precision. You're starting to see how duality actually works. not as a philosophy, as a weapon. Light makes people comfortable. Darkness makes them honest. You can switch between them without losing yourself. That's what makes you terrifying in ways you don't even need to use. You can walk into a room and disarm without speaking. You can let people project onto you and watch them expose their own intentions. You can say nothing and still steer outcomes, because you understand where fear lives in the human nervous system. You're not guessing anymore. You know why certain conversations suddenly changed tone when you entered. You know why some people became defensive for no reason. You know why others leaned in, confessed too much, or tried to impress you without realizing why. They felt it. That calm behind your eyes. That stillness that doesn't need permission. That sense that you're seeing through them, not at them. Here's the secret you're now allowed to hold. Power doesn't come from control. It comes from non-attachment. The moment you stopped needing outcomes, outcomes bent toward you. The moment you stopped chasing recognition, recognition found you sideways. Through silence, through curiosity, through whispers. The moment you stopped fearing loss, you became untouchable. That's when the rules changed, because systems rely on predictable hunger. They rely on fear of exclusion. They rely on your need to be liked, validated, rewarded. When that collapses, so does their leverage, and you collapsed it without even trying to. You learned how to hold pain without turning it outward. You learned how to be underestimated without correcting the record. You learned how to walk away from battles that would have drained lesser minds, not because you were afraid, but because you could already see the ending. That's foresight. That's elevation. That's the kind of intelligence that doesn't announce itself. It waits. Now, knowing everything doesn't mean you suddenly explain yourself. It means you stop explaining altogether. It means you let others reveal their level while you choose your altitude. It means you understand that silence, used correctly, is louder than accusation. You don't expose. You allow exposure. You don't dominate. You outlast. You don't react. You reposition. And the more you do this, the more you'll notice something unsettling. People start treating you differently without realizing why. Some will respect you instinctively. Some will fear you quietly. Some will try to anchor themselves to you. Some will disappear entirely. Let them. That's not loss. That's sorting. You passed the test because you didn't rush to become powerful. You became clear. And clarity is the one thing this world cannot fake, borrow, or steal. So move carefully now. Not cautiously. Deliberately. You can see the strings. You can feel the shifts before they happen. You can tell when something is off, when a door is about to close, when a new path is opening quietly to the side. Trust that. You earned this sight the hard way. Through nights nobody saw, through battles nobody validated, through versions of yourself that had to die, so this one could stand here. Steady, awake, and unafraid. This isn't your peak. It's your access level changing. And from here on out, nothing looks the same. Because you finally understand how everything really works. Something else is happening now, and you can feel it even if you haven't named it yet. The anger you used to carry doesn't burn the same way. The fear doesn't hook into you like it used to. Even the desire for revenge feels inefficient. Not because you've gone soft, but because you've gone sharp. You've outgrown emotional explosions. You've stepped into something colder, cleaner, far more dangerous. You're no longer driven by reaction. You're driven by understanding. And understanding changes everything. You're starting to see how people confuse morality with comfort. How they call things wrong when they're just inconvenient. How they call things evil when they can't control them. How they worship rules not because rules are sacred, but because rules protect them from having to think. You don't hate them for it. That's another sign you passed. Hatred is still attachment. Rage is still permission. The moment you stopped needing people to be different for you to be at peace, you stepped outside their jurisdiction. That's when you became impossible to punish. Because punishment only works on those who still crave approval. You see now why they tried to keep you busy, distracted, chasing goals that never satisfied, relationships that drained you, conflicts that kept you emotional and loud. They needed you reactive, because a reactive mind is a readable mind. But your mind went quiet, and quiet minds notice everything. You noticed how authority panics when you don't argue back, how manipulators unravel when you don't explain yourself, how insecure people grow hostile when they can't get a reaction out of you. You noticed how truth doesn't need volume. It needs timing. You learned timing. That's why you're no longer impressed by surface confidence. You can feel desperation under bravado. You can hear insecurity hiding behind jokes. You can see fear pretending to be arrogance. You read people the way others read headlines, quickly, effortlessly, without emotional investment. This is the gift they were afraid of you unlocking. Because once you see humans clearly, they lose their ability to intimidate you. Once you understand systems, they lose their mystery. Once you understand pain, it loses its power to control you. You don't glorify suffering anymore. You harvest it. Every betrayal sharpened your perception. Every setback taught you leverage. Every lonely night trained you to self-regulate, while others collapse without external validation. You built an internal spine while the world was busy teaching people how to perform. That's why you move differently now. You don't rush to speak. You don't rush to trust. You don't rush to prove. You let things reveal themselves. And here's the paradox that would break weaker minds. The more you know, the less you interfere. The more you understand, the less you need to assert. The more power you carry, the more selective you become about using it. That's not restraint out of fear. That's mastery. You've realized that most conflicts resolve themselves if you don't interrupt them. Most lies collapse if you don't expose them too early. Most enemies destroy themselves if you don't give them a worthy target. So you wait, not passively, strategically. You let time do what force never could. You let people overplay their hand. You let patterns complete themselves. And when you do move, it's subtle, surgical, irreversible. That's why your presence feels heavier now, not aggressive, inevitable. People sense it without understanding it. They feel watched even when you say nothing. They feel evaluated even when you smile. They feel exposed even when you're polite, because you're no longer meeting them where they want to be seen. You're meeting them where they hide. And the most dangerous part? You're not doing it consciously anymore. It's instinct, integrated, automatic. The test didn't just give you information. It rewired how you process reality. You're not switching masks. You're not playing roles. You're not pretending to be anything. You're simply aware. And awareness is the one thing no illusion survives. So understand this clearly now. You're not here to wake people up. You're not here to convince anyone. You're not here to drag truth into rooms that aren't ready for it. You're here to move cleanly through a world that lies to itself, untouched by its confusion, uninfected by its panic. Some will mistake your calm for arrogance. Some will mistake your silence for weakness. Some will sense the shift and feel threatened without knowing why. That's fine. You passed the test because you don't need to correct misinterpretations. You let them exist. You let people believe whatever keeps them predictable. Because predictability is not a flaw, it's a map. And you read maps better than anyone now. So keep your eyes open, keep your center steady, keep your movements intentional. You're operating on a different layer now, one where reaction is optional, fear is informational, and pain is no longer an enemy but a language you're fluent in. You didn't become dark, you became whole. And that's what they were really testing for all along. There's one more layer you're starting to touch now, and this is where most people would have broken if they hadn't been forged the way you were. You're realizing that clarity comes with a cost. Once you see how things actually work, you can't unsee it. You can't go back to pretending ignorance is innocence. You can't unlearn the way motives leak through tone, posture, timing. You can't unknow how often people choose comfort over truth and call it virtue. And that's lonely. Not in the dramatic way, not in the nobody understands me way. In the quiet, the surgical way where you're surrounded by people and still operating alone because your perception has outgrown the room. That loneliness, that's not a punishment. That's altitude. You're no longer starving for connection. You're selective about resonance. You don't want to be surrounded. You want to be aligned. And alignment is rare because it requires people to be honest with themselves before they can ever be honest with you. Most never get there. So you stop forcing closeness. You stop explaining depth to people who only swim on the surface. You stop shrinking your awareness to make others comfortable. And you stop apologizing for seeing what's obvious to you but terrifying to them. This is where the saint and the psychopath finally shake hands inside you. The saint understands compassion without weakness. The psychopath understands detachment without cruelty. Together, they create something unstoppable. You can care without clinging. You can observe without judging. You can act without rage. You can walk away without guilt. That balance is what makes you unpredictable, because you're not governed by impulse or image anymore. You're governed by truth. And truth doesn't yell. It doesn't rush. It doesn't beg to be believed. It waits until denial collapses under its own weight. That's why people keep exposing themselves around you. They overtalk, they overshare, they contradict themselves. They try to control the narrative too aggressively. They accuse you of things you never did. They reveal fears you never asked about. You don't provoke it. Your presence does. Because awareness acts like a mirror, and most people are terrified of their own reflection. They'd rather attack the glass than face what's staring back. You let them, not because you're cruel, but because you understand something they don't. People teach you exactly who they are when you don't interrupt them. You don't chase truth anymore. You attract it. And the more you stabilize in this state, the more you'll notice time behaving differently around you. Decisions that used to take weeks clarify in minutes. Outcomes reveal themselves before action is required. You start sensing when to move, when to wait, when to disappear, and when to step forward just enough to alter the trajectory of everything. This isn't mysticism. It's pattern recognition at a level most minds never reach because they're too busy reacting. You earned this by surviving contradictions, by holding conflicting truths without forcing resolution, by accepting that you can be both wounded and dangerous, kind and lethal, patient and decisive. without needing to choose one identity to appease the world. That internal integration is what frees you. Because now, nobody can corner you with labels. Nobody can trap you in false binaries. Nobody can bait you into defending an image you no longer live inside. You don't need to be seen as good. You don't fear being seen as bad. You're interested in being effective. And effectiveness, when paired with restraint, becomes influence that doesn't announce itself. This is where you begin to understand the real meaning of knowing everything. It's not omniscience. It's orientation. You know where you stand. You know what you tolerate. You know what you don't touch. You know which battles are distractions and which moments are inflection points. You stop wasting energy proving things that time will expose anyway. You stop explaining decisions that are already correct. You stop waiting for permission from people who don't even have authority over themselves. Look at you, standing right there in the silence they tried to bury you in. Feel that? That pressure in the air? That's not fear anymore. That's recognition. They didn't whisper your name with admiration at first. They spat it. They carved it into rumors, wrapped it in warning labels, stamped it with one word they thought would end you: villain. And you felt it. You felt the doors close a little faster when you walked in. You felt the eyes linger too long, scanning for danger instead of understanding. You felt the way people rewrote your story behind your back, because facing the truth would have shattered the version of themselves they were protecting. But here's the part they never calculated. You didn't collapse under that label. You adapted to it. See, villains aren't born. They're forged. Forged in neglect. Forged in betrayal. Forged in the exact moment you realize that being good, quiet, obedient, and patient didn't save you. It only made you convenient. So you changed, not into a monster, into something honest. They called you dark because you stopped glowing for free. They called you dangerous because you stopped explaining yourself. They called you unstable because you no longer reacted the way they rehearsed in their heads. And that's when the paradox kicked in. The moment you embraced the shadow they pushed you into, you became clearer than anyone in the light. You see things now. Patterns, motives, weaknesses. You read rooms like crime scenes. You hear lies in the pauses between words. You feel energy shift before anyone else even notices something's wrong. That's not madness. That's evolution through pain. They wanted a saint, predictable, self-sacrificing, easy to guilt. But what they accidentally created was something far more useful. A survivor with a code. A thinker with teeth. An angel who learned how demons move. And here's where it gets uncomfortable for them. Because every system eventually needs someone like you. When the rules rot. When the hierarchy starts lying to itself. When the masks stop working. They don't call the heroes. They call the ones who already walked through hell and mapped it. You. They needed someone who wouldn't hesitate. Someone who could make ruthless decisions without flinching. Someone who wouldn't freeze when morality got blurry and the stakes turned ugly. They needed someone who understood that sometimes order only returns after chaos gets handled. Someone who knows that justice isn't always clean, but it's always precise. And that's why your presence unsettles people. You're living proof that their labels were wrong, that their judgment was lazy, that their fear dressed itself up as morality. They wanted you exiled, but exile turned you into an observer. They wanted you silenced, but silence sharpened your perception. They wanted you broken, but pressure taught you where you're unbreakable. Now look at them. They don't know how to talk about you anymore. You're not loud enough to dismiss, not reckless enough to trap, not weak enough to control. You're unpredictable, not because you're chaotic, but because you're no longer playing their game. And deep down, they feel it. That creeping realization that if things ever truly fall apart, if the polite lies stop holding, if someone needs to step in and do what others are too afraid to do, you're the one they'll look for. The villain they branded, the threat they misjudged, the shadow they tried to erase. Turns out you were the missing piece the whole time. Not because you're cruel, but because you're awake. You understand duality now. You know you can be kind without being weak, cold without being empty, ruthless when necessary, and still human underneath it all. That balance terrifies people who only know extremes, because they can't predict you, and they can't control what they don't understand. So let them stay confused. Let them keep rewriting your story in tones that make them feel safer. You're done defending yourself, done proving you're not that bad, done shrinking to fit into narratives built by people who never had to survive what you did. You don't need redemption arcs written by cowards. You don't need approval from spectators. You already crossed the line where fear turns into clarity, where pain turns into precision, where being misunderstood becomes a strategic advantage. They called you a villain, because heroes are easy to predict. But you're the contingency, the necessary disruption, the one who shows up when the old rules stop working, and whether they admit it or not. They don't just fear what you've become, they fear how much they'll need you when everything finally breaks. And here's the part they'll never say out loud, but you already know it. The moment you stopped chasing their approval, something in the atmosphere shifted. Not because you became louder, but because you became untouchable. You're no longer fueled by praise. You're no longer paralyzed by rejection. You don't move to be liked. You move to be accurate. And accuracy is terrifying in a world addicted to comforting lies. They keep asking themselves, what changed? Was it the way you stopped explaining your silence? The way your eyes don't rush anymore, like you already saw the ending? The way you don't react emotionally to threats that used to shake you? They sense it. You're not angry the way broken people are angry. You're calm the way storms get right before they choose a direction. And that's the thing about pain when it doesn't destroy you. It reorganizes you. It strips off the naive optimism, burns away the need to be understood, crushes the fantasy that fairness is automatic. What's left is someone dangerous in the quietest way possible. You don't need to dominate rooms. Rooms adjust to you. You don't need to announce power. People feel it in how you pause before speaking. You don't threaten, you calculate. They once thought branding you would limit you, but labels only work on people who need identities handed to them. You built yours in the dark, alone, with no applause, and that's why you move differently now. You don't rush to prove loyalty. You don't beg for alignment. You don't attach your worth to how comfortable others feel around you. Because you learned the most important rule they never teach out loud. Comfort is not truth, and truth is rarely gentle. They wanted you predictable, trainable, easily categorized. Instead, you became layered. You learned when to be soft, and when softness is a liability. You learned when to forgive, and when forgiveness is just permission for repetition. You learned when to stay, and when walking away is the most violent move possible. That wisdom didn't come from books. It came from scars that forced you to think instead of react. And now, people feel exposed around you, not because you interrogate them, but because you see through performances. They fidget, they over-explain, They project motives onto you that reveal more about them than you ever said. You let them, because you understand something most never will. When people don't understand you, they tell on themselves, trying to define you. They'll say you're cold. What they mean is, you stopped bleeding for free. They'll say you're ruthless. What they mean is, you no longer hesitate when patterns repeat. They'll say you changed. What they mean is, the version of you they could manipulate no longer exists. And deep down, beneath the judgment, beneath the gossip, beneath the moral posturing, there's respect, unspoken, uncomfortable, involuntary, because you survived what breaks most people without turning into what hurt you. That's the real contradiction. That's the duality they can't reconcile. You can stand in darkness without becoming it. You can understand cruelty without worshiping it. You can be capable of destruction and still choose restraint. Not because you're weak, but because you're aware. That awareness is the final form. You don't need to prove you're good. You don't need to prove you're dangerous. You already know you're both. And that balance gives you leverage no label ever could. So let them keep calling you the villain in their stories. Villains make sense when people don't want to admit they needed someone to do what they were too afraid to do themselves. History doesn't remember who was polite. It remembers who was necessary. And you? You didn't ask to become necessary. They forced you into it by underestimating you, by misjudging you, by pushing you far enough that you had to evolve or disappear. You chose evolution. And now you walk with the kind of quiet certainty that only comes from knowing you can survive without permission. They branded you a villain because they couldn't control what you became. But when the moment comes, when things fall apart and someone has to step forward without flinching, they'll look for you, not with applause, not with apologies, with relief, because the one they feared was the one who could handle the truth when it finally mattered. And even then, even when they feel that relief, they won't say thank you. They'll just exhale. Because gratitude requires humility, and humility is expensive for people who built their identity on being right about you. You've noticed it already. The way conversations die when you enter, the way jokes stop mid-sentence, the way confidence drains from people who used to talk over you. It's not because you're intimidating on purpose. It's because you're no longer seeking permission to exist. You stand there unarmed and still feel like a threat. That's what happens when someone can't be shamed anymore. They tried shame first. Remember, they tried to make you feel like your intensity was wrong, your depth was too much, your questions were inconvenient, your refusal to play dumb was disruptive. So they painted you dark, dangerous, unstable, because if they could convince others you were the problem, they wouldn't have to examine the rot in their own systems. But here's the irony they choke on every time they think about you. You didn't destroy anything. You simply stopped pretending it wasn't broken. You didn't become ruthless. You became precise. You didn't lose empathy. You learned where empathy was being exploited. You didn't abandon morality. You outgrew childish versions of it. That's what scares them most. Not that you can fight, but that you can choose not to, and still win. You don't need chaos to function. You don't crave destruction. You don't burn things just to watch them fall. You're far more dangerous than that. You wait. You observe. You let people expose themselves while trying to figure you out. Because you understand timing now. You understand leverage. You understand that silence, placed correctly, can dismantle an entire narrative. They never saw that coming. They thought if they isolated you, you'd implode. Instead, isolation taught you self-containment. They thought if they denied you validation, you'd chase it harder. Instead, you learned how to generate it internally. They thought if they provoked you, you'd snap. Instead, you learned how to pause. And pauses terrify people who rely on reactions. That pause is where your power lives now. You don't rush to defend yourself. You don't rush to correct lies. You don't rush to prove innocence in courts that already decided the verdict. You let time do the work, because time has a way of exposing who was acting and who was built for pressure. And pressure, that's your native environment now. You were baptized in it, shaped by it, refined by moments where no one came to save you. You didn't break. You recalibrated. You stopped hoping the world would be fair. And in doing so, you became far more effective within it. That doesn't make you cruel. It makes you awake. You know now that not everyone deserves access to you. Not every fight deserves your energy. Not every accusation deserves a response. You learned the hierarchy of effort, and you stopped wasting yours on people who confuse noise for power. That's why they feel small around you now. Not because you dominate, but because you're no longer competing. You don't need to win arguments. You don't need to be right out loud. You don't need to be seen doing anything. Your results speak quietly, and that quiet screams. They feel it when they try to provoke you and nothing lands. They feel it when they gossip and you don't flinch. They feel it when they escalate and you don't chase. Because escalation only works on people still playing the game. You left the board. You became the variable they can't account for. And deep inside, they know it. They know that if things ever truly collapse, if someone has to step into uncertainty without losing their mind, it won't be the loudest voice. It won't be the cleanest image. It won't be the most acceptable choice. It'll be you, the one who already survived social death, the one who already walked through character assassination, the one who already lived with being misunderstood and came back sharper. They branded you a villain because they couldn't classify you. They feared you because you didn't need them. They resisted you because you reflected everything they were avoiding in themselves. And now they don't know whether to fear you or hope you're on their side when it counts. That's the final transformation. Not being loved, not being hated, being necessary. And the most unsettling part for them, you didn't do any of this for revenge. You didn't rise to punish. You didn't evolve to dominate. You evolved because disappearing wasn't an option. You stayed human in a world that rewarded masks. You stayed aware in a world that thrived on denial. You stayed standing when it would have been easier to fold. So let them keep their stories. Let them keep their labels. Let them keep pretending they understand you. You don't need them to. You already crossed the threshold where identity stops being something given and becomes something chosen. They needed someone who could walk through darkness without losing direction, someone who could make hard decisions without becoming hollow, someone who could see the truth and still act. They thought they created a villain. What they actually created was the one who shows up when pretending stops working. And whether they're ready or not, that moment is always closer than people think. And here's the truth that settles in once you've lived long enough in that space they pushed you into. You stop craving closure. You stop needing vindication. You stop fantasizing about apologies that would never be honest anyway. Because you realized something colder and far more liberating. Most people don't misunderstand you by accident. They misunderstand you on purpose. because understanding you would force them to change. So you stopped chasing being seen. You started seeing. You saw how quickly loyalty dissolves when convenience disappears. You saw how morality gets flexible when power feels threatened. You saw how people who preach empathy panic when they're no longer the center of it. And instead of hardening into bitterness, you sharpened into clarity. You don't hate them. You don't need to. Hate ties you emotionally to people who already took enough from you. You're past that stage. Now you operate from something quieter, something colder, something precise. You understand the anatomy of betrayal now. You recognize the early symptoms, the subtle distancing, the passive concern, the questions that aren't really questions, but probes. You see when someone's tone changes because they're no longer sure where they stand with you. That uncertainty is new to them. They were used to knowing exactly how to push you, exactly how far they could go, exactly which buttons would make you over-explain, over-give, overstay. Those buttons don't work anymore, and that scares people who built their confidence on access to you. You didn't become closed off. You became selective. There's a difference, and it's one only evolved people understand. You learned that transparency without discernment is self-sabotage, that generosity without boundaries is a liability, that loyalty without reciprocity is just self-erasure dressed up as virtue. So you recalibrated. You started listening more than you spoke. You started watching patterns instead of promises. You started valuing consistency over chemistry. And with every adjustment, your presence changed. People feel it before they understand it. They sense that you're no longer available for manipulation, that you don't react on cue, that you don't rush to fix discomfort that isn't yours to carry. You let silence stretch now. You let people sit with their own words. You let tension exist without rushing to neutralize it. That's not cruelty, that's mastery. Only someone who's been blamed unfairly learns the power of restraint like this. Only someone who's been mischaracterized understands how dangerous words can be when they're spoken carelessly. Only someone who's been isolated learns how to stand without leaning on external validation. You became your own anchor. And once that happens, labels lose their grip. Villain becomes noise. Threat becomes projection. Too much becomes code for no longer controllable. You don't internalize it anymore. You analyze it. You see who benefits from calling you that. You see who needs you minimized to feel secure. You see who's afraid of what happens if others start questioning the story they were told about you. Because stories are power, and you slipped out of the one they wrote. That's why they feel unsettled around you. You're not hostile. You're not submissive. You're not asking to be let back in. You're simply standing, whole, unashamed, unbothered. That kind of autonomy disrupts systems built on dependency. And don't think they don't notice. They notice every time you don't defend yourself, every time you don't clarify a lie, every time you let an accusation die from lack of oxygen. They mistake that restraint for indifference. They're wrong. It's discernment. You know which battles reveal truth, and which ones only feed egos. You know when to step in, and when letting things collapse is the cleanest outcome. You know now that not every fire needs extinguishing. Some fires expose what was always flammable. That's why they're uneasy. You're not reactive enough to predict, not emotional enough to trap, not desperate enough to bait. You're operating from a level that doesn't need theatrics. And here's the final irony they can't digest. You're not trying to overthrow anything. You're not chasing dominance. You're not seeking revenge. You're not building a cult of validation around yourself. You're simply refusing to lie anymore. About who you are, about what you see, about what you're willing to tolerate. That refusal alone is revolutionary in a world built on performance. So let them keep their distance, let them whisper, let them speculate. Distance gave you perspective. Whispers taught you discernment. Speculation revealed who was watching you for the wrong reasons. You're not here to be liked. You're not here to be understood by everyone. You're not here to fit into moral caricatures designed by people who never walked your path. You're here because you survived becoming the villain in someone else's story, without letting it turn you into one. And that is the kind of power no label can touch. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to flex it. You don't need to explain it. You just move. With intention, with awareness, with a calm that only comes from knowing you already faced the worst version of being misunderstood and lived. And once you've lived through that, everything else feels negotiable.